Brilliant. So I understand you're both using blockchain technology in order to empower specific communities that you see as being marginalized today. You're both using cryptocurrency to some extent. I understand that in your case it's broader than cryptocurrency. But I'd like to start by asking each of you a little bit about where you started and how you ended up thinking that a new cryptocurrency is what is needed to empower your community. So let's start with you, Tavonia.
Yes, the person that's started everywhere. Hi, I'm Tavonia Evans, the founder of GUAP Coin, a cryptocurrency that I created to support black and brown businesses and community businesses in disadvantaged and underserved markets. Essentially, I began GUAP Coin out of many reasons. One of my reasons, of course, is I am a second generation I guess you could say product of gentrification in terms of business. My family is from, my dad's family is from Wilmington, North Carolina, and at one point our family did own a lot of small businesses and...
Just closer to the mouth.
I'm sorry.
So we can all hear you.
Our family did own a lot of small businesses and a great deal of land in Wilmington, North Carolina. And we've gone through different phases, such as the Wilmington riots. I don't know if you've heard of the Wilmington riots. And now, when I return to Wilmington, North Carolina, we don't really have anything left. We don't have our land. We don't have our businesses. And we have no mark of our legacy. And as I see it, blockchain is a great way to preserve legacies, amongst other things. And on the startup side, this is my second startup. I'm the founder of a company called Safe to Meet, which I hold a patent for. But as a black woman, I was unable to raise funding. People of color raise less than 2% of funding, startup funding, VC funding, and women even less than that, and black women even less than that. So, you know, it was very frustrating for me to have this platform and not be able to continue in putting it out. So again, blockchain, cryptocurrency was a way I saw to be able to create a funding system, you know, within our community so that we might be able to fund more startups and businesses, et cetera, that come after me.
Brilliant. And okay, we'll talk a little bit about how it worked out. That answered my question of how it all started, but maybe before Christof, how has blockchain served your purposes of empowering the LGBT community?
First of all, thank you for having me here, Dan, and VivaTech is a wonderful event. It is an event where we celebrate technology as a force for good. And that's really how I came to blockchain at the end of my journey. I started some 20 years ago. I won't give you the exact number. You can re-engineer my age, which I don't want you to do. I'm originally from Germany. I live in San Francisco for the last 17 years. I've been a serial entrepreneur all my life. 8 years ago, I started HORNET, which came to become the world's largest gay social network with 25 million users today, and allows gay men, queer male, 18 to 35 mostly, to express themselves safely and authentically, to actually find community and support in their quest to come out. So for me, my entire life, technology has been an enabler, if used right, to take your destiny into your own hands. And that's when blockchain came up on the horizon, I realized there's a huge opportunity that a decentralized technology can become a platform for a decentralized community, often in the hiding, to take its destiny into their own hands. To that effect, we started an independent, not-for-profit foundation called the LGBT Foundation, which has proposed to utilize blockchain for basically 3 big tenets to empower this community: identity, currency or value storage, and a way to raise funds like a taxation model. With those 3 tenets, identity, currency, and taxation, you basically can recreate a decentralized governance system for a decentralized community, which is often in the hiding. And let's just remember how vulnerable the community is. There's 400 million LGBT people worldwide, there's still 72 countries that criminalize LGBT today, in some cases 6 or 7 with death penalty. And today, timely enough, is also the Idaho Day, May 17th, the International Day against homophobia and transphobia. So I'm very happy that we can address these injustices and vulnerabilities of minorities with technology as a force for good. And I will be happy to share more details on this.
So what I find very interesting is that you're both using blockchain to empower your communities, but you're expressing very different needs of your communities. So you were saying that as a black woman, it's difficult for you to get the funds. So I would say you want more visibility, whereas in your case, you're saying in some countries, it's a death threat, and people want less visibility, at least not to be associated with being gay. So basically, you're using the technology to empower your communities in very different ways. But I'll go back to you, Tavonia. So now with the cryptocurrency that you put in place, how has that played out? And what has been your major achievements with it? Does it now generate more funds that entrepreneurs like yourself can use?
Well, we're still very much, even though I started almost 3 years ago, we're still very much in the beginning. We're in the 3rd iteration of the blockchain, which I developed. I am an engineer as well. I've been in technology for 20 years. So we're in the 3rd iteration of it. And this is still a learning industry. It's a very new industry. You run into roadblocks every week, maybe. And on top of that, this is a cryptocurrency. We're dealing with money. What we're trying to create is actual real money. And that is a very, very heavy, not only responsibility, but it involves a lot of research and a lot of different factors involved. It's way more difficult than people think.
So what are the next steps for you?
Just creating a coin.
So what are the next steps? What is about to concretely happen?
The next step is we are in the middle of solidifying a partnership with a company that is going to provide the point-of-sale devices and the debit cards for us to provide our merchants. We want to bring about the mass adoption of crypto as well. It's much bigger than just serving our community, because at least 95% of the world's population has not been impacted or touched by cryptocurrency yet. And we feel that we are in a position to be able to do that.
So before I go back to Christof, what would be your ideal situation, not only for your own startup, but for this to be used as a channel of empowerment for the African American community? What is like the fantasy of people using GUAP? How? That suddenly young African American women who want to start a business finally don't have to knock on doors of old white men who don't even take them seriously?
Exactly. I mean, that's definitely one of the end games. One of the end games is to be able to tap into a resource that we generate, because in the African American community, we spend trillions of dollars. So where's that money going? Of course, not back in the community, but creating a cryptocurrency that circulates amongst or has an impact on our community can bring some of that money back to the community, so that we would have funds to be able to expand small businesses and expand startups.
Okay, let me just remind you that I'm looking at my tablet, not because I'm being rude or chatting with my friends, but because I'm waiting for your questions to come in. So Slido that we used before is not only to send in your ideas for the word cloud, but you can still send questions to our panelists, and I'll try to bring them here. So given that you are trying to empower 2 different communities that are different but not mutually exclusive, what's going to be the next steps? If other communities all start now proliferating with their own cryptocurrencies, with their own technologies, what's going to happen? I'm going to have to decide when I make a transaction. Now I'm putting it on steroids and thinking, the 2 of you are doing extremely well. Other communities are following, and they all want to do the same thing. So when I go and get coffee, I would have to ask myself, am I first a man, first gay, first Asian, first middle class, first a lawyer, first speaking at VivaTech, and then pick the right cryptocurrency that expresses my identity today? Or
well, in certain communities, you might walk in a store and it says, we accept GUAP coin. Oh, cool, I got GUAP coin. I can use my GUAP here. You know, I'll go into another store and they, they're accepting the LGBTQ token. Hey, oh wow, I can use this. People have options, and it will empower them and give them more value and make them feel more value, that they're making an impact on their community.
Christof, you're nodding. Do you feel like you...
I'm totally with Tavonia on it. So I think we want to make sure that these communities kind of connect on an economic level with one another. Just to give you an idea, if the LGBT business, the spending of LGBT worldwide is about $4.6 trillion US. If that was a GDP, it would be the 4th largest economy in the world. given that countries like Switzerland have their own currency, I think why wouldn't we have our own currency? So, you know, and they exist in parallel to the US dollar and the euro.
I think the next G8, we need to have the gays represented.
I'm totally
as
in
an
favor
economic
of it.
power.
If we were a country, we would also have our own aircraft carrier, and we would have much nicer uniforms, I can tell you that.
An excellent service.
It's a financial revolution. I mean, money speaks, money talks. You can stop people from doing things, you can block people from doing things, but you can't block money.
And back to your, identity is not exclusive. So you engage in different manners. I mean, I've seen people who have more than one credit card in their wallet, and that same could be true for currencies.
Well, you've been in America for a while. I think here in Europe we're more modest on the number of credit cards that we hold in our wallets. But what's your ideal situation then with your technology developing? What would be the main impact that you would like to see? Because you basically describe a whole range of problems of the LGBT community. And we also discussed that their needs are very diverse, because what a gay man here in Paris needs in order to have a complete life is not the same as in Uganda and not the same as in Russia. So what's the kind of impact and empowerment that you want to give to the community?
Yes, so I think I see blockchain as a platform which is ultimately governed by its users, and it's a platform for innovation. So what we intend to do with the foundation is to basically guide or give the community access and then let them innovate on it, whether that's distribution of medication in Uganda, or whether that's a tool for raising funds for HIV positive people that are not otherwise able to tap into it. Whatever it is, there's a lot of innovation that can happen around it. From the HORNET side of things, we feel we have the resource to kickstart it, and also we bring all the users to make this viable through adoption from the get-go. When we launch the wallet, we actually don't do an ICO or anything. We just build and launch a blockchain. And we convert an existing perks program that we have, like think of a rewards program, onto the blockchain so that other people can start using that platform for their purposes. It's an open source protocol, so there's no ICO, no security, all this stuff. We simply look to build, enhance, and share, and give back to the community. When we launch in the next few weeks on HORNET, the wallet will be a part of the app with millions and millions of users. Its installed base will be probably only second to Coinbase worldwide, and it will get an immediate rush of adoption. And adoption, of course, is critical for platforms and ecosystems to emerge. And here we give that jolt for the community. But in the end of the day, it's not HORNET or me or anyone saying you should do this or that. It's an open source protocol, and you never want to underestimate the smarts, the innovation, and the ideas of crowds when they get these powerful tools into their own hands with a certain level of governance, which is that we need to, for instance, adhere to diversity and inclusion. These are things we cannot infringe upon, I would say.
So Tavonia, Christof, has a very good starting point in the sense that he already has a platform and a community that he can now pitch it to. I don't know if you would consider to partner with any community platforms, websites that address the African Americans in order for you to pitch your currency from there.
Yes, we actually are already partnered up with, we are looking at, and we're talking to influencers in the community, of course, in the entertainment industry, which is very excited about blockchain and cryptocurrency. We're very strategic about how we're doing this, though. So, you know, we haven't put out all of our eggs in the basket as of yet. But once we launch with this initiative, then we'll be bringing out our partners, and we're working really hard to get the word out about GUAP Coin. Because another portion is, once we get the word out, we have to educate people. And education is a huge, you know, barrier in this business, because, you know, that's funding. We don't allocate the funding towards educating just normal people about crypto. Nobody wants to do that. You know, nobody is really excited about bringing about the mass adoption of crypto, because if you want to bring about the mass adoption of crypto, you have to educate just the everyday average person that's going to be using it and seeing it as a value and knowing that this is money.
But isn't there a paradox that you're trying to empower those who are economically underprivileged, and often there's a correlation between that social class and the level of understanding and sensitivity to using new technologies or even sensitivity to risk?
Not at all. I mean, that particular market is on social media killing it. They are not ignorant of technology. This is, you know,
would your mother be happy to put her money into a cryptocurrency?
My grandmother is 96 years old and she knows about GUAP coin and she's very excited.
Touche. I have nothing to add.
Yes.
Christof?
I don't think it's necessarily a class issue, though class, of course, is a big portion of it. Let's see, I'm a white gay man living in San Francisco. I'm socioeconomically well off and I'm decently healthy and fit. So I'm on the, probably the, you know, on one end of the spectrum, and then, you know, you go all the way, let's say, to countries with, you know, very oppressive regime, but, you know, even in our country, in the United States, think of people of color, people who don't live on the coastal cities, think of people who are maybe not healthy. And so this is all blurred in between class or not class. I don't think that's necessarily what it is, but some people have maybe achieved more than others, or they know more, like maybe about the technology opportunity. And I think it's about sharing this and giving this back to the community and empowering it to go and educate them and use this technology.
And that's
I think this is the mission we all have if we are more on the privileged side versus the less privileged side.
I wanted to add one more thing to that too. We also need to give credit back to the market that is responsible for getting Bitcoin to where it is today, because that is absolutely not the upper class. That is absolutely not. That is, you know, and a lot of that has been shaded under the quote-unquote dark web. But on the streets of the United States, people knew about Bitcoin for years, and they were making use of Bitcoin as money. However they wanted to use it, they were still using it, and they were very well aware of it. My kids are very well aware of it. My teenagers are very well aware of it. So they are not ignorant of cryptocurrency. As a matter of fact, they're going to be using this much easier than we are, because they already are.
Yeah, I wanted to say that in my introduction, I presented the two communities as vulnerable ones, but in our previous discussion, we also discussed the fact that in some countries, the LGBT community could be at least economically very well off, and in a way, it's a way of doing justice, and the community also helping itself. So it's not only about protecting a community which is vulnerable, it could be, and correct me if I'm wrong, LGBT in certain Western countries where are doing relatively well, wanting to reinforce and empower those in countries where are being discriminated. And I don't know if I can make the parallelism also to the African American community, where those who are better off want to pay back to the community. You're about to explain to me I'm totally wrong.
With respect, I don't would put it, for instance, on a country. You go just to the banlieue here and think about a gay Muslim immigrant a transgender person, for instance. I don't think there's that much well-off and that much privilege. I think about it the following way. Blockchain is for me like open source data. You kind of create a pool of data, a record, a ledger, where you store truth, the record of truth, which is not relying on a gatekeeper, like an accountant, an auditor, social media, government, banks. All these gatekeepers, which always means the gatekeepers accrue power. Gatekeepers accrue power. Think about Facebook's power because they have data. Think about government power. Think about banks. They know the data is power. And blockchain to me is like open source data. You put the data in the public realm and you basically create a mechanism to bypass those gatekeepers, because power corrupts. And if you undermine this fundamental gatekeeping power, you also undermine the power of these people who often then are corrupt. That's kind of my way of thinking. It may be abstract, but that's how I think we can empower people and disrupt structures by basically undermining and disrupting these gatekeepers.
I want to add to that in terms of data. One of the core tenets of where we're looking at our value in terms of a blockchain is also data, because some of the most valuable data on earth belongs to that of people of color. Why? Because there's a hole in the data that is missing of people of color. They can't even implement proper facial recognition technology. They can't implement certain medicines because they don't have the data to back that up for these markets. So we have a tremendous opportunity as a platform that is targeting people of color to have ownership of that data and to leverage that data as a currency, because data is currency.
And I find it very interesting because we started the afternoon with a message of how AI could also perpetuate our prejudices, and you're basically saying, well, sometimes humans are the problem and technology would bypass them rather than replicate the kind of prejudices that they have. And on that, I have an interesting question for you. Somebody is saying, we all know that it's very, very difficult to be an entrepreneur and to raise money. How do you know, or why do you feel that your race played the color of your skin played a role here? So I think that's already a very good answer.
Well, essentially, and I have experience of going in front of VCs, et cetera, is that you're talking to people who do not know your problems. They do not know the problems that face you every day as an African-American woman, as a black woman, as you know, any other type of woman. They don't know the issues that are important to you, and many of them don't care to even learn those issues. So therefore, by proxy, it becomes a problem of my gender and my race that is a barrier for me being able to obtain funds that are supposedly set aside to go to particular markets.
Okay, another question that came in, which is kind of on the margins of our discussion, but it's about the fact that Bitcoin is picking up again. Will that have an impact on your activity?
Always.
Explain.
Unfortunately, I kind of get a little bit upset about it because, like, I guess you could say I'm a crypto purist. I'm a Bitcoin purist, you know? So I'm like, we're in this for the long run. We're in this for mass adoption. We're not in it because Bitcoin becomes valued at $100,000.
At the same time, the fluctuation is one of the attributes that make it so problematic.
Right, so it's very frustrating because, you know, when we have to go out there and we're trying to show the value of this to go up against the volatility of Bitcoin, whether it's valuable or not, it just totally defeats the purpose.
Right.
Because tomorrow we're still going to be pushing the system that can bring economic freedom to everyone. So it becomes a bit of a problem, I guess you could say.
You wanted to add something, Christof?
I would just like to say we think about blockchain is not only the currency implementation. That's one use case of blockchain. Blockchain per se is a ledger in the cloud that has a proof of that is open source, and it's not based on a gatekeeper. For instance, one example of blockchain use is identity tokens. They have nothing to do with the currency. So identity is something very important for LGBT because identity is what makes you a member of the community, your sexual identity or your sexual orientation. So it's a self-chosen identity, and there's a choice you have how much you want to disclose about this. So there's a permissiveness in there. So we talked about that too. Do you want to be targeted or not? So identity token has nothing to do with the cryptocurrency, has nothing to do with Bitcoin, has nothing to do with mining and environmental damages. I saw one question on that. It's purely that I am in full control how much of my identity I disclose without losing my identity and my right, for instance, to cast my vote or to be, when I want it, recognizable in a transaction in a certain specific context. So identity has nothing to do with cryptocurrencies, but it's blockchain based. So we need to think broader. Blockchain is open source data, and there are many, many use cases. So let this innovation fly.
Someone asked the question, they check GUAP and they're less than 200 currency holders. We're no longer on Ethereum. So you're likely checking Ethereum, the old original token. When we originally launched, we were an Ethereum token. We now have our own blockchain. So that's inaccurate in terms of our wallet holders.
I was going to spare you that question, but you're right, people see it, so I mean, it's better that you answer.
Yeah.
For me, this has been a completely eye-opening experience. Since the time I had you on the phone to discuss this and to understand what it is that you guys are doing, I'm still not sure I fully understand what it is that you're doing, but I find that you're using technology in the most inspiring and progressive and best way that we can. Ula, that was my tablet way. So thank you so much for making the time and joining us here. And let's give them a big applause.
Thank you.